Hello, my name is Zach, and this is Zach's Top 10. Today's subject, Top 10 Kids Shows Not Made for Kids. When I say this, I mean shows that play during hours and on networks that are obviously geared towards children, but either through odd writing, suggestive material, or complete accidental creation, ended up not being very kid-friendly. Now, to help narrow things down, I decided to review animated shows, since it's an easier list to go through. And these shows are what I grew up with, so mostly in and around the 90s and early millennia. I might go into older or newer shows at a future time. Number 10. The Warner Brothers Collection. What I mean by this is a collection of cartoons aired in the early to mid-1990s, including such shows as Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, Tiny Toons Adventures, and Freakazoid, along with several others, some of which will be mentioned later. The reason this is so low on the list and coupled together is because while the writing goes over the heads of a lot of kids, there's nothing too offensively bad about these shows. The humor was at least a very good attempt at ambiguity, though some, like the Brain Orson Welles parody, were definitely meant for older viewers. All in all, these collections of shows are very good and probably can and should be watched today for a great amount of enjoyment. Number 9. Johnny Bravo. Johnny Bravo is an odd one. On the outside, it seems like a generally funny idea of a mama's boy who thinks he's hip and cool, even though he is regularly outwitted by his adolescent neighbor. The problem lies when you actually take a closer look at the character of Johnny Bravo. This is an obviously mentally deficient man, who basically acts like a sexual deviant, harassing and almost assaulting any girl he takes a fancy to, and regularly hanging out with a young girl. I would continue on, but you can probably read more about him on the registered sex offenders list. Number 8. Courage the Cowardly Dog. Courage is another show that is innocent on the outside of a dog who lives in the middle of nowhere with his two caretakers, Eustace and Muriel. But this time the problem isn't with the main character, it's with everything else. This show is bizarre and actually scary at times. While nothing offensive, there are scenes and characters that could give kids nightmares, like the alien chickens or the puppet master who turns people into puppets. It still gives me shivers sometimes. Number 7. Batman the Animated Series. The Batman Animated Series is another show made by Warner Brothers during the 90s. But unlike their comedy shows, this show takes an entire 180. It was very dark compared to the other series of the time. It was extremely stylized and mature, especially compared to their competition at Marvel, who followed a pretty strict code against violence. While still having adult situations and serious storylines, a lot of it was still lighthearted and comedic at points. And hey, who could hate a show where Mark Hamill laughed like a maniac?
He could be gleeful and with wild abandon. On the freeways in Los Angeles. No, that's not it. No, that's not it.
Number 6. Sailor Moon. Now I know, anime really shouldn't be included on here since the standards of American and Japanese are very different, and I don't even have that much anime on here. But this and another one must be noted simply because some of the things involved with the storyline and degrees they went to cover them up. Just a few examples of Sailor Moon are things like multiple references to breast size, the main character getting drunk, which they covered up with getting dizzy from juice, making an effeminate male character female, and the most infamous, covering an obviously gay couple by calling them cousins. Yeah, because no one would notice these two supposed cousins being really close all the time, touching each other, hugging. I think I should move on. Number 5. Angry Beavers. Angry Beavers is a show that started weird and just got weirder. It's similar to shows like Freakazoid with its more mature references, but unlike those shows, it relies pretty heavily on them and bizarre characters, like a lazy bear, an overbearing lizard, and a stump. While the actions of the show are kid-friendly and eye-catching, the conversations seem to lean more towards the older audiences, even down to the series finale, which completely breaks the fourth wall and discusses the cancellation and syndication of the show. Definitely a fun show, but overall probably for an older audience, which it was intended for, at least I believe. Number 4. KaBlam. KaBlam is where we get into the straight-up bizarre. For those unaware, KaBlam played out as a variety show, playing many different types of cartoons, from stop motion to claymation to classically and artistically made animated shows. hosted by two characters in a comic book named Henry and June. The main in-between segments are filled with references, innuendos, and fourth wall breaking, talking to the producers of the show and jumping ahead and back in the storyline of each episode. These are only the toppings of the shows like Action League Now, filmed in a mix of stop motion and flame-throwing the figures around, and Prometheus and Bob, a completely dialogueless show about an alien trying to teach a caveman things. While mindlessly entertaining for kids who like watching random destruction, it's still a show enjoyed by older people, and people who are completely baked off their minds. Number 3. Invader Zim. Now, some may argue that this show is deserving of the top spot, and to some points, I agree. The only reason I didn't give it the top spot was, at least to me, I don't think it was actually ever meant to last more than a season, or an episode, or be shown at all. For those who aren't familiar with Invader Zim or its creator, Jonan Vasquez, his past work mainly has to do with a comic by the name of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Just from the name, you should be able to see where Jonan's type of comedy lies, and is no different from this show, which uses weird imagery and gross-out humor to entertain. It was probably one of the few shows on this list that was actually cancelled for the exact reason that it didn't really fit in with the age demographic it was being marketed to, and it probably all went according to plan, right, Jonan? I'm on to you. Number 2. Ren and Stimpy. For those of you who didn't expect Invader Zim to top the list, probably expected this one too. And for the most part, you're right. I've called other shows bizarre, but I think this is the one that is, above all others, truly deserving of the title. Mostly because it is the best way to describe the show. Bizarre. The dimensions, the characters, the designs, the stories, all of it. It is a show kids watch because it had pretty colors and funny songs. Probably a good 80% of the show was lost to the kids watching, and even to adults, not a lot of it made sense. But we don't care. It still had the pretty colors and the funny songs. And the number 1 show is... Cardcaptors, also known as Cardcaptor Sakura. Now, some might not agree with this entry, again being anime, but trust me when I say that this show has horrible aspects covered by cute little girls in frilly dresses. Only some of the horrible things include at least 2 counts of incest between cousins, pedophilia among teachers and students on at least 3 occasions, homosexuality involving both genders, and various others. This show was so censored that the American version barely resembled the original, with scenes cut out of every episode and just about every character's name being changed. The show ended up doing so poorly that the last season was never aired, and it's probably for good reason. It only gets worse. Those are only 10 shows that really aren't for kids. But hey, maybe you can watch them now and maybe hope to understand what they're about. My name is Zach, and I hope you enjoyed.